Hello students, this is your tutorial on APA format. So what I'm going to do here in just a second is share my screen with you. I've got a few pages to show you. One is going to be a document that's going to demonstrate what APA format will look like for you. But the first place that I'm going to go to once I share my screen is a web page that you can go to look for how to do APA format just in a general sense. So I'm going to go ahead and share that, and hopefully this works really, really well. All right, so I'm going to do that. Okay, and hopefully you are able to see my screen. I'm going to pull up Firefox and move that over to this screen that I'm pretty sure is the one being shared. All right, now I'm going to go to owl.english.purdue.edu. And actually what that modifies to, they took out the English part because it's not just about English. It modifies to owl.purdue.edu. Okay, so that's a good website for you to go to. This is the Purdue Online Writing Lab that's going to show you how to do a lot of different things in writing, but what I want us to focus on is APA formatting. Okay, so when you go over to the middle of the page, a little bit down, under their popular resources, you're going to see APA formatting and style guide. So go ahead and click on that. Okay, and then over here on the left side of the screen, they've got links. Close that out. They've got links to just about everything that you need in terms of, learning how to do citations, what those look like, how the reference list is supposed to look as well, for all different kinds of sources, plus some basic rules. And then it's also got a whole lot that I'm not really focusing on for your papers, very likely, but they have some stylistics on writing itself, how to do headings and seriation. I just want to see some general headings from you in your paper as I instruct you when you get feedback and things like that from me. And then they've even got a sample paper. I'll show you a sample paper in just a little bit, but they've got a sample paper for you. Just basically everything you need to know about how to format your papers for APA. So what I'm going to focus on today, though, is your citations, because that's the thing that I see students struggling with the most as they are writing their papers. So I'm going to click on this link right here, in-text citations, the basics, okay? And that's going to give you some general rules. What you see here is in-text citation basics on capitalization, quotes, italics, underlining, all of those kind of things. And so they start out with some quotes here, showing you how to cite your quotes. Okay, so you have some for short quotes. Okay, what a short quote is basically is just a quote that takes up only about one, maybe two lines. Okay, but if you've got a longer quotation than that, one that takes more than two lines, you need to format it a little bit differently. For short quotes, you're going to quote within the sentence, for instance. For long quotes, you're going to have a quotation that is indented over. Okay, so that's a really important thing to note just in terms of our discussion, because when you're looking at APA format, when you're trying to format your paper correctly, attention to detail like that is really important. Not just for whether you indent or not, or whether it's put in the sentence or not, but anything with regards to citation. You've got to pay really close attention to detail. Otherwise, you're citing it incorrectly and it confuses your reader. Okay? So you've got the citation format for quotes here. You've also got your citation format for summaries or paraphrases. Okay? So one thing you might notice, for instance, between quotes and paraphrases is the use of a page number. When you are quoting, you always cite your page number, okay? And you do that by doing a little P, period, space, and then your page number, okay? And you can either put that well, actually, with a quote, you'll always put that at the end. You can either put it by itself, or you can include, for instance, in this one, Jones 1998 in the parentheses with the page number, as they do right here. Okay. All right. Well, but with paraphrases, on the other hand, you kind of have the option whether to use a page number or not. Okay. The general consensus on that, in terms of publication and things, is that you don't have to use the page number, but periodically you'll come across a professor, you'll come across, if you were writing for a journal or a textbook or something like that much later on in your careers, you'll come across an editor that prefers the page numbers to be in there, and of course you would use them then. But generally you don't have to use page numbers, and that's why it says here, although it's not required, you don't have to use page numbers when you are summarizing or paraphrasing something. Okay. So before we move into some other parts of APA formatting, I want to talk just a little bit about paraphrasing with you, because it's something that students seem to get mixed up about quite frequently. What is paraphrasing? When a professor asks me to paraphrase, what do they mean, and how do I do it correctly? When you're paraphrasing, a lot of students make the mistake of thinking that paraphrasing is just finding a few synonyms for words that are in their source and changing a few words around to different words, or changing the order of the words around, or changing the pronouns and all of those things to paraphrase, or as we put it more simply than that, putting things in your own words. Okay? That's not paraphrasing, when you are just finding a few synonyms or changing the order of the words around. What paraphrasing is, it means you have read the entirety of what a source has to say on a specific topic that you're writing about. Okay? So you read the entirety of what they have to say, and then in just a sentence or two, you summarize that. Okay? So you're not going to go, to paraphrase, you're not going to go to your source, find a sentence, and paraphrase that sentence. And that's where students often fall in the trap of, oh, well, I've got to find some synonyms and reorder the words in order to put it in my own words. It's because they're trying to cite just a specific sentence in their source. Well, often that specific sentence is not all that the author has to say on that topic. And so you need to be reading the entire passage, the entire paragraph, maybe the entire page, maybe it's a collection of pages that are on a specific topic, and then, once again, within a sentence or two, just put that entire topic, what the author wrote about it, in your own words. Okay? And that'll keep you from falling into that trap of just changing the order around, which a lot of professors, as you are coming, going into graduate school, for instance, a lot of professors, especially if they know the source that you are citing really well, they are going to ding you for that. And it's possible that you could get accused of plagiarism if you are just changing the order of words around. The standard is much higher when you get into graduate school for how you're writing than it often is in undergraduate. But even in an undergraduate class, you may come across a professor that is a real stickler for making sure that you are citing your sources correctly, for one, but also paraphrasing well. And another thing that you're doing when you're paraphrasing well is you're also showing your professor that you know what you're talking about. We don't like to see students just regurgitating information from one source, changing a few words, and acting as though they understand it as though it's their own in some sort of way, even if they're citing it. Showing that you understand something is not just copying what they say and changing a few words. Showing that you understand something is, I have read what they have to say, and then I'm summarizing it in one sentence or two. Okay? All right, so enough on paraphrasing. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me. If you want to show me some examples from your paper, for instance, where you're paraphrasing, what I'd like you to do is give me a snapshot of what the journal article or textbook is saying on that, and then show me what you are writing, and I can tell you whether you're paraphrasing well or not. And that's a good thing to do, is come to me with those kinds of questions so that you'll be able to get one-on-one clarification from me. Okay, so we're going to go to another part of OWL's style guide here, and I'm going to show you just a little bit about authors and how to do it when you have one author versus more than one versus even more than 6 authors as your source. So when you have a work, okay, by 1 or 2 authors, you always give both authors' last names, okay? And you can do that in 2 different ways. If you are citing their names outside of the parentheses, you spell out and, okay? If you're citing their names inside the parentheses, you put this little ampersand symbol in, okay? So never use the ampersand outside of parentheses, okay? Always spell it out outside of the parentheses, okay? When you're citing a work that's by 3 to 5 authors, what you do is the first time that you cite your source in your paper, you cite all of the authors' last names, okay, and then use the appropriate and, depending on where you're putting it. Generally, actually, when you have more than 2 authors, you're almost always going to want to put that citation at the end of your sentence and put everything in parentheses rather than having this long list of authors outside of parentheses. Okay, but the next time, so that's the first time. The next time that you cite that same source, you do this little et al. Thing, okay? Because it would just get really long and ridiculous if you were needing to cite all of the authors every time that you cite them, okay? So you do this et al. Thing, so it's Kernus is the first author, and then et al., period, comma, then the year of publication, okay? And that's, by the way, something I didn't show you with the basics page, is when you are citing your source, always put the year of publication. The only exception to that is if you are citing the same source within the same paragraph, okay? If you're within the same paragraph, you don't have to use the year more than the first time, okay? But outside of that same paragraph, you always cite the year again, okay? All right. So that's if you have 3 to 5. If you have 6 or more authors, you always use et al. You never list all of the authors when you have 6 or more, okay? There's also this thing about unknown authors. The 2 ways of doing that would be to use the title, okay, of the book rather than the author's name. Since you don't have the author's name, you can put the title of the book in that parentheses with the year of publication. Or you might use anonymous, okay, as your author's name. But that's going to be pretty rare. When you're writing for instance, a psychology class, you're almost always going to be citing a source where you know the author's names. Really, when you use anonymous or when you don't have an author cited, it's when you're citing a web page that they don't list the author. And yeah, web pages are okay in some contexts to be citing, but most of the time we don't ask you to cite a specific web page. We don't want you citing those because they're not generally not scholarly sources. Okay, so that'll be the case when you are citing such sources, but you're rarely ever going to have to do that in your papers that you're writing, especially in psychology. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you the reference list. Okay. Same thing with the reference list is the rule. You have the rule for reference lists is the same as with your in-text citations. You need to pay attention to detail. The reference list, the way it is properly formatted with APA, has a lot of rules about things like capitalization, use of initials in authors' names, italicizing things, and all of those sorts of things. Spacing even is a rule, okay? So you need to pay attention to all of those rules. So the basic rules are on this page for basic rules for your reference list. So read through those. It's a good thing to basically know, okay? Now, I'm going to only show you this page, well, actually a couple of pages, I'm sorry, so never mind. So what we've got here is, for your reference list, a listing of how to do it with single author, 2 authors, multiple authors beyond 2, and also things like an organization. Occasionally you may be citing, for instance, the Centers for Disease Control, or in this case, the American Psychological Association. So you don't have an author, okay, but it's an organization that has published the information. So in that case, for instance, in your in-text citations, you would cite, well, for this one, where you have this corporate author, American Psychological Association, 2009 for your in-text citation, okay? But this is how you do it when you have an organization for an author, okay? So notice a couple of things about the detail within the citation, okay? First of all, you've got indentation. This is what we call a hanging indent, okay? Where you have the first line indented all the way to the left, okay? And then the second line and after, you've got it indented 4 spaces over. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's falling under the 4th letter of the first line, okay? So every line after that is in, so you got the first line all the way to the left, second, third, fourth line, however long your reference is, every line after that comes on the 4th space, okay? So there are ways I can show you how to do that when I show you the sample document, okay? But we'll move on from there for right now, okay? Another detail to notice is how to, or where to italicize, okay? What you italicize is the larger work that you are citing, okay? So for instance, if you are citing a journal article, you're gonna have the title of the journal article, okay? The actual article itself, you'll have the title of that. And then you're also going to have the title of the journal that you are citing, okay? So what they've italicized here is the title of the journal. Here is the title of the article. This is the title of the journal, okay? So you always italicize that, okay, which is the larger work. And I'll show you what the difference is for books in just a little bit, okay? You also italicize the volume number, okay, this bit right here. For journal articles, you'll always have a volume number, okay, and you cite that volume number, okay? Now, sometimes, let's see if there's an example of this in here. I don't see one. Well, sometimes with journals, you're also going to have an issue number that follows the journal article. What that is journals will separate their publication over the year by issues. So usually you'll have like a quarterly publication. So you'll have issue 1 is the first quarter, issue 2 is the second quarter. What you do with that is you put the issue number in parentheses next to the volume number, okay? But you do not italicize it, okay? But that's not a huge deal. And usually you only do that if you have an issue where they start the pages over at 1 with every issue. You actually don't put that issue in there when we have what we call continuous pagination, where with issue 1, maybe they end on page 250, and then with issue 2, they pick up with page 251. In that case, you don't put the issue number in there. But I'm not going to be really picky about that. That's just really for your information, especially when you get into graduate school and you're needing to do that, okay? All right, so next, let's look at books, okay, and how you cite them, okay? So with a book, well, the book is the larger work, right? So you're going to italicize the title of your book. Just like with a journal article, you italicize the title of the journal, but not the title of the journal article, okay? So you are italicizing that, but everything else pretty well looks the same as far as authors. One thing I didn't show you with authors in the journal publication citation that I showed you a second ago is that you cite the last name and then the initials of the author. Sometimes you'll have just one initial for their first time. Sometimes you'll have 2 initials for their first and middle name, okay? If you have the information, use it, okay? So last name, comma, first initial, second initial, okay? Then you put another comma, and then the ampersand, and always put periods after each initial, okay? All right, so the ampersand for the reference page, your ampersand is going to be used. You never spell out "and" on your reference page, Okay. Next is going to be your year of publication after the authors are listed. So always put that in parentheses and put a period after it. Okay. All right. So here are also some citations for edited books. What an edited book is one where you have multiple authors contributing across the work, and each author or set of authors will usually write just a chapter in that book. Okay. In that case, what you're going to have is this edited book, and so how you're going to cite that, for instance, is down here with an article or chapter in an edited book. You cite the authors of the chapter, okay, and then the year of publication, and then the title of the chapter that is not italicized, rather. Okay, so don't italicize the title of the chapter, but then after that you're going to put in the editors' names is next. Okay, and then you put this little thing eds to denote that these are the editors, or if it's just one editor, you just put ed dot, okay, comma, title of the book italicized, okay, because it is the larger work, okay. And then if you are citing an article or chapter in this edited book, you also put the page numbers of the chapter that you are citing in parentheses, okay. Now notice one thing about this edited book. For the authors of the chapter, you put last name and then initials. For the author, or for the editors' names, you put initials, then last name. So that's a further denoting of who are the authors of the chapter and who are the authors, or I'm sorry, the editors of the book. Okay. So once again, pay attention to detail. All of this detail isn't just to trip people up. It's not to make it take longer to do it or anything like that. It's going to seem like it because it's freaking annoying to have to do this. But what it is doing is it's giving further information, further cues to the reader that this is what this information is. So you have the authors in that order because that's telling you, all right, these are the authors of the chapter. You have the editors' names listed in a certain order that's different because that's telling you these are the editors, beyond you having to look at the eds thing right here. Okay. All right, so that's really all I'm going to show you as far as your reference list. Okay. Now, one thing I want to go back, actually, there's one more thing I want to show you. Go back to your in-text citations, and I'm going to show you this right here. Okay. So I'm showing you this for how to do punctuation around your citations. Okay. When you are citing your source at the end of your sentence, okay, like this one does, you always put the period after your citation. I see students doing it so much where they put the period before the citation, okay? In APA format, you always put it after the citation, okay? If you're citing your source at the beginning of a sentence, on the other hand, first of all, you're not going to put all of the authors into parentheses. You're going to want to put the authors outside of the parentheses, okay? And you do something like this. According to author, and in this case it's American Psychological Association, but it's going to be individual authors if you have individual authors. So you do according to author, year in parentheses, and then comma, and then your sentence, okay? So that's the best way, and really the most common way you see people cite at the beginning of a sentence, okay? All right, one more thing to show you before we move on to where I show you the sample paper. Okay? I'm going to go down to this little bit on headings and seriation, okay? This is something that is really important to showing the reader of your paper how you have your paper organized, okay? Whenever you're covering multiple topics within a paper, you need to have headings, okay? Because those headings denote when you are changing topics, okay? You don't want to have a paper with no headings when you have multiple topics in the same paper, because you don't really have anything from paragraph to paragraph that's obvious, signaling where you're changing topics. And so it's going to confuse your reader really easily, right? So you want to put these headings in to let your author know when you're changing topics or when you are changing sections of your paper, okay? So when you have sections, okay, such as in a journal article, you've got one section that is the lit review, and it actually typically doesn't get a heading in journal articles, but it's the lit review, and it's kind of known that it is because people who read journal articles tend to read them all the time. But then your next section would be the method section, okay? And so when you have sections like that, where you have the lit review, the method section, the results section, and the conclusion, okay, you're going to use the level 1 formatting for each of those sections. So you would put not necessarily lit review in that first one, but the first heading that you would see like that would be method. And so you're going to put that centered on the page, boldface, and uppercase, okay? All right, and then if you have multiple words after that first word, you'd put it in lowercase, okay? But generally, you're not going to be writing papers like that for psychology until you get into psych research or something like that, okay? Where you're actually writing a manuscript as though you would be publishing it, okay, in a journal. Okay, but most of the time you're going to be writing papers where you just have topics, okay? So when that's happening, you're going to start at level 2, okay? So with that, you're going to have left aligned heading, boldface, and then upper and lowercase heading, the same as with level 1. And I'm sorry, I misread that and misquoted it earlier. When you're doing these upper and lowercase, what it is uppercase is the first letter, lowercase for the other letters. You don't put everything in caps, okay? But each word, the first letter gets a capital letter unless it's an article like and, for instance, okay? All right, so that's uppercase with lowercase letters following, okay? Left aligned, boldface. Your next one is going to be indented, okay? So you're not going to have it fully left aligned. It's going to be indented once again to that 4th space, okay? And you don't do uppercase except for the first letter of all of the words, okay, like here. So you see this is indented 4 spaces over. You've got it italicized, okay, and boldface. So indented, bold-faced, okay. I'm sorry, I messed up. I skipped a level. See, this is where it gets confusing. So pay attention to this page, right? All right, so the first one after that second level is indented, boldface, lowercase, heading with a period. So that is this one right here, okay? Your next one after that will be indented, boldface, italicized, and lowercase heading with a period, like this one, okay? And then eventually you'll get to level 5, and it's not showing level 5 on here for some reason. They have level 5 on there, but you don't have it on the page here demonstrated. That is nothing boldface, but it's indented, italicized, lowercase, okay? The purpose of all of these levels, okay, that I just showed you is denoting where you have a section or a topic heading, and then you've got subsections within that same topic, okay? So for instance, when you're writing a journal article, you're going to have this level 1 heading of method. Well, level 2, you might have the site of the study under method. That's covered under method. Next, describing your population in your study. And then next, you're going to maybe be describing subsections of that population at level 3. Okay, so site of the study is a subsection of method, and then participant population is a subsection of method, and then teachers and students is a subsection of participant population. And so for each subsection under a certain section, you go to the next level. Okay, and then when you're starting a new section, whether if it's under the first section, you start again at level 2, okay? And then if it's starting a whole new section, like your results section in a journal article, you'll start again at level 1, okay? All right, So that's the last thing I'm going to show you as far as the OWL page. What I want to go to next is the sample manuscript. I'm going to stop the share real quick and then do a new one so that I can make sure that you're seeing the same thing I am, okay? So this is a sample document. Now, your paper is not going to look exactly like this, okay? This is my dissertation. Okay, so hey, I'm giving you my dissertation for free. Usually you got to pay $50 for these things. So hey, I never say I never gave you anything, right? All right, so anyway, you are going to have the formatting. Okay, you can go ahead and use this formatting just in terms of general how the page is going to look. I'm not going to focus on for most of your papers. And by the way, this video is being recorded for multiple classes, not just one, okay? So that's what I'm saying for most of your papers or for most classes or anything like that. For most classes, I'm not going to make you focus on running head and all of that. You will need to do that eventually, though, as you move up through, okay? So go ahead and just be practicing it now, but I'm not going to grade you on whether, for instance, your title page is formatted correctly. I don't want to focus on that, okay? So I'm not going to grade you on it, but go ahead and be practicing it. And this is basically how you would format a title page. Now, you're not going to have all of the same information here. For instance, none of you are writing a dissertation. You're not getting your Doctor of Philosophy degree. You're not writing for an advisor or anything like that. Basically, you're just going to have the title and then who it was by. And you're not even going to have to put your degree information in there. Okay, this is all dissertation formatting as far as the extra information. But this is how it would look. Center justified, title, by, your name, okay? And then running head, what this is, it's something that gives the reader a clue as to what paper is being read, because often what will happen is they'll have the pages all separated out, spread out, and they want to make sure that they're keeping the same paper together, and they may have multiple papers spread out. So they're wanting to make sure that, you know, they are looking at the same paper and they're keeping the page numbers, okay? All right. Now, for most of your papers, too, you're not going to have an abstract either, okay? That is really just for journal articles, okay, and journal manuscripts. Now, you may have a professor ask you for an abstract. In that case, write an abstract form. But if the professor doesn't ask for one, you generally don't have to have one, okay? All right, so what I wanted to show you this for was so that you can see some things about APA formatting in terms of your citations, okay? You're also going to see it in terms of the seriation of your headings too, okay? So you can see, for instance, here is a level 1 heading, and then we move to level 2, and then we have an indented level 3 heading, okay? You'll also see APA format here, okay? So here, I cited the source at the end of the sentence, okay, so you can see the period after the end of the sentence. Remember that, please. It's a big pet peeve of mine. But also here we've got the author, last name. Here I've got an et al. Because this particular source was a source that had it had 6 or more authors in it, okay? So I put an et al. Even though it's the first time that I'm citing it, and then the year, okay? Now, if you have multiple sources within the same parentheses, and you can do that, by the way, and actually, it's a really good thing if you are doing that, because what it means is that you are synthesizing sources together, okay? You're not, for instance, just going and citing one source per paragraph, or what you're really doing when you're doing that is you're just summarizing a source in a paragraph, and then your next paragraph is another summary of the source. In APA writing and academic writing, you do not really do that, okay? What you're really going to be doing is you're going to have several sources that are covering the same topic, okay? So when that's happening, and for instance, I've got a sentence here about much of the research on family caregiving of children with type 1 diabetes, that's what T1D is, with type 1 diabetes has focused on mothers because mothers tend to provide most of the in-home treatment and other care of children with type 1 with diabetes, okay? So I have multiple authors that said that, so I put all of those authors in parentheses together, okay? So when you're doing that, you're going to put a semicolon between the authors between each citation. Okay. All right, so that's a good example of those kinds of citations. Note, I have always got author last names. You never cite in-text citations author first names. It's always just author last names. Okay. Let's see, any other examples? Oh, here's one where I cited an organization citation. This is a citation of the Centers of Disease Control. So here I didn't have an author, but it was one of those corporate citations, corporate authorships. So here it's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2007. Okay. All right. So really, I rarely quote. And by the way, that's another thing about, well, when should I quote and when should I paraphrase? When you are paraphrasing, well, let me back up to quoting. You really only quote when you are citing your source, and if you were to put it in your own words in any kind of way, the meaning would be lost. Okay, there's just no possible way to put that into your own words. So for instance, you're always going to quote a list, right? Because you can't put a list in your own words. So you need to quote it. It needs to be put in quotation marks. You need to cite author, year of publication, and page number. Okay. Another instance where you'll be quoting is if you are citing a source that is, for instance, an extremely profound statement, something philosophical, something that the author is making a statement that it just cannot be restated. And if you do, you're losing meaning, you're losing feeling, you're losing the point, right? So in that case, you always quote, okay? But I rarely quote, okay? Because what I'm doing when I'm writing is I am reading an entire source and then I'm boiling it down to a sentence or two. Okay? I am synthesizing sources together. And you can, if you're talking about things that authors have written, you can't quote. You're not supposed to quote two or have two quotes in a row, right? You need to be synthesizing the information, and paraphrasing is the best way to do that. But remember, do not just change the words around. You've got to read the whole thing and boil it down to a sentence or two that shows the basic point of what they're saying. Okay? All right, so that is going to be it for in-text citation, okay? You can see across the pages that I have different headings and all of those kind of things, and you change the seriation level for each section and subsection, okay? Next, I'm going to show you the reference page just real quick so you can see that. Yes, this is a very long paper. Dissertations tend to be very long documents. Mine, with the appendices and everything, was over 100 pages. All right, yeah, students get kind of caught up in how long dissertations are. They don't ever want to have to do that. Well, the reason they're so long is because there's a lot to put in there. You're not having to stretch yourself to get length out of your paper just because you have so much to write about. So anyway, here is my reference list. Okay? A lot of references, okay? Just like you would see in a journal article. All right, so here, another thing with the reference list, always in alphabetical order, okay? Another thing with your reference list, always on a separate page. Never start the reference list at the very end of your paper right after you are done writing and on the same page. You always start a new page for your reference list. It is always called references. Don't call it works cited. That's an MLA formatting thing. Okay, we're using APA, so it's always references. Okay, always in alphabetical order, always hanging indent. Let me go ahead and show you how you do hanging indent. I'm going to unindent this one. I can't do it just by backspacing. What I'm going to have to do is actually highlight it. Okay, then I'm going to hover up here. Let's see, it's not going to let me do that right there. Hang on. Hover up here. Come on, do your thing. Well, it is not letting me hover. It used to let you hover, and then it would bring down this little ruler, and that's where, oh, wait, I know what it is. Can't do it because it's on 2 pages. That's probably what it is. Hover, hover. Nope, still not letting me do it. Let me see here. Yeah, it's not letting me do it that way. Okay, so it used to let you do that. I'm having to learn something new here. All right, so what you do then instead is you go to paragraph, okay? And it's going to have different indentation options, okay? So you've got the increase indent, decrease indent options here. What I can do is indent the whole thing if I highlight it, okay? Or let's go, I'm going to decrease the indent just here so I can show you how it works. Is it going to let me do it? Dang it, it doesn't let you do it. Ah, here we go. All right, this will do it. All right, so let me highlight here. What you do is you go to this, you're going to be on your home tab, and you go to paragraph, and you go to this little pop-out box, okay? And then on indentation, you have different indentation styles. You can change it to none, which is going to move that to no indentation whatsoever, okay? You can also do first line, which is just going to indent the first line. That's also not the proper way to do it on APA, and I see students doing that all the time where they indent the first line but not the others, okay? What you're going to do here is on indentation, choose hanging, okay? And that's going to put each of your sources in hanging indent. Now, I don't think that you can do that with multiple sources. Let's test that out real quick, okay? So here I'm going to change it to none and let it move all of these to no indent, okay? That's not what we want. So here I'm going to try to change it to hanging and see what it does. Oh, it does it. All of the sources at the same time. So what you can do then is have your citations double spaced like they are here, okay? Then you can just highlight, you can do it one at a time if you prefer to do it that way, just to make sure it doesn't mess up, or you can do multiple ones and then do the indentations that way. If it doesn't work for you when you're doing the multiple ones, maybe it's because, maybe I'm able to do this because it was already formatted in this way. If you can't do it that way, just highlight one and do the hanging indent. Okay? That's the easiest way to do it, and actually that's a lot better than hovering your cursor up here, it bringing up the ruler, and you have to do it manually. This allows you to do it pretty well automatically. Okay? All right. Good, 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 good. Okay, so now one thing to note, the indentation spacing on this is off from what I told you. This is well past fourth space, okay? And the reason for that is in a lot of journals, they don't want you to do the 4 spaces. They want you to do a ½ inch indent on the hanging, okay? So one way you can change that, you do it by this amount, and you can change the distance there. So I basically just made this 4th space by changing my hanging indent to 3/10 of an inch, okay? So you can do it that way. All right, that is the end of our APA tutorial. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Feel free to email me, come see me in class. I'm happy to answer students' questions about these things. If I'm going to be a stickler a bit to detail on APA, I want to give you the chance to see me about it, get some help with it. It takes some practice. It takes a lot of practice to get really good at doing APA automatically. And that's basically what I do. I have to write papers so often, and especially while I was in grad school, I had to write papers so often that I just kind of became an APA expert. I didn't even have to look at the manual to have a paper properly formatted in APA, and eventually you'll get there. But right now you need to be looking at owl.purdue.edu. You need to maybe get a copy of the APA manual, okay? And right now we have actually just moved to the APA 7th edition. So that's going to be coming up soon. As of the making of this video, I've still got students in 6th edition because I don't think that OWL website has updated to 7th edition yet. Okay, so I'm just doing 6th edition right now, but eventually I will be having students do 7th edition. Okay, and with 7th edition, you'll just need to make sure, go back and double check. Make sure with the OWL website, with the APA manual, if you have that, that your formatting is correct. Okay, all right. So that is the end, and I will see you all later. Thank you very much.